Let's get it. This is Life's Essential Ingredients with Jeff and a Mike, where we hope to inform, inspire, and transform lives, one essential ingredient at a time. Welcome to the show. Ashito, we back, and we are season 3, episode 30. Listeners, thank you again for just following and tuning in to Life's Essential Ingredients. Can't believe we've been blessed to do this work, and I gotta give a quick shout out to probably our number one listener, Kay Nakota. I love you for listening. I just spent time with her, and she was going over all the episodes. She's listened to every episode. And so, Kay, we love you. And listeners, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to get different guests on the show, different topics, reach out to me, Jeff at c4leaders.org. So about this podcast, it's actually part of a nonprofit. And the nonprofit is called C4 Leaders. And we're the only nonprofit to utilize the pizza making process to create space for our companions to be seen, heard, and loved. Part of the nonprofit, we write children's books, obviously host this podcast, and then we use the most amazing handmade, hand-tossed sourdough pizza to bring out the best in each other. So if you're interested in that, you can go to c4leaders.org or the children's books, pizzadays.org. And I also got to give a shout out to Germany. Germany is the second highest country with the people that listen to our show, and they purchased several books. So anybody in Germany, thank you so much for supporting the work that we do. And again, you can check out our books at pizzadays.org. But let's get into this episode. We have Katja Schleicher. She's in Germany, in Munich, but she's lives in the Netherlands. And she is most definitely going to inform, inspire, and transform your life. So get out a pen and paper because we're getting ready to go to school. The best place you can find our guests is just through her website. And I'm going to spell it out real slow. KatjaSchleicher.com. It's got an incredible site, so make sure you check it out. And if you are tuning in on YouTube, which we have our YouTube channel, she's kind of getting all excited, Katja, and so we're fired up. So about our guest, with 3 languages, 2 passports, and a European heart, Katja travels across borders constantly to bring people and ideas closer through communication. Katja, I'm going to keep going, but I'm getting goosebumps just from saying that. I just love people and ideas closer through communication. She speaks at conferences about communicative misunderstandings and how to initiate change through communication. Known for her provocative style and her sense of humor on stage, she looks deeper into our communication troubles and is not afraid to talk about them. Katja has degrees in both German and English in language, literature, linguistics, and psychology. For more than a decade, Katja has passionately crafted her style and has shared her gifts with clients all over the world. Katja, thank you for helping many people communicate more effectively, and thanks for being our guest on Life's Essential Ingredients. Welcome to the show.
Good morning to you. Hi, how are you doing?
Great. So excited to have you. And we always start each episode with a thought of the day, which is a quote that I pick after researching you. And I'm nervous, listeners. I am nervous with this one. But here it goes. And I don't even know who said it, but I got to give honor to the person that I heard it from, and that's Lane Hensley. If you're ever tuning into episode, Lane, I love you and appreciate you for this thought of the day. Here it goes. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, although you can make it thirsty. Why would I pick that for you, Katja? And listeners, I'm looking at her on the YouTube right now, and she is looking stumped. So I hope
it's very cool. It's very thoughtful. But I'm wondering, tell me, why did you pick that for me? Yeah.
So after researching you, in communication and in you working with people, they kind of got to take that step for themselves. And sometimes, where you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, but you can make them thirsty. Yeah. And I think that's what you do best, is you help bring out through your humor, through just who you are. I can already see the spirit that you have. You help people want to take action through the teachings that you're given, and therefore make them thirsty for bettering themselves.
Yeah, that is, if you put it like that, it's absolutely correct. And the power of the narrative, when we start taking people on a journey to any experience, when I'm accompanying a startup company and they tell their founding story, for instance, or if you have a new CTO somewhere in a bigger organization, and this person shares their vision for the first time with the teams, then this is exactly the moment when, if you do it right, and if you put all the things together properly, you can indeed make all horses thirsty. Yes, but what you say is so right as well, that they have to drink themselves. And as a trainer and speaker and a coach, I know that my powers, my communicative powers, as big as they are, they have a limit. And exactly this last step for me is very, very often the first step for them. But it is an absolute obligation for the people working with me that they take exactly that step themselves. Good thing is, the moment they did that, it's amazing. Because that is like a door going open for them, not for me, because my work is basically, after making them thirsty, is done. But the moment they go through that door for themselves, having taken that step by themselves, that's limitless. That's so cool. And when they feedback that to me, I mean, that totally makes my day. Really, my week.
I love it. And again, in listening to you, I listened to a couple of podcasts about helping people tell their story, obviously through your expertise, but that's also, where making people thirsty. And you're talking about the CEO sharing their vision. And I think this applies to anybody, of crafting your message to make people thirsty for wanting more, and then hopefully for taking action. And that's what our nonprofit is trying to do through pizza, and we're trying to craft our story to help make people hungry, so to say, so then they can go share that with the other people that they're going to interact with. But let's get into you. So you have such a different life than at least me. Mike is Croatian, although he was born in the U.S. Just a few days, his mom came over here, and a couple of days later, Mike was born. But so he's got European blood. But what is life like over in Europe for people that maybe haven't traveled and been there?
So when I put myself in the perspective of the typical American person, although we know that the typical American person is not existing, what you probably will see first is a bigger fragmentation in basically everything, in cultures, in countryside, city. So everything feels, because of that, a little bit smaller. And all of a sudden, because it feels smaller and there's so much going on, it feels more diverse. And that diversity can be quite confusing, especially when you're from North America, and especially when you're from the US. And the second thing is due to historical reasons. When you a big part of my work is with intercultural teams and clusters. We have the tendency to work and sometimes be burdened with what we have in history. In Europe, being very rich in history carries in many things communication a big burden. While in the US, when you look from the American perspective to Europe, everything is much more, it's less burdened. It looks like. Of course, the reality is different if you look to political polarization and all that. But if you compare those two, culture-wise, and the way they approach communication, the culture in the United States is way more freely and open. And one example, I worked a lot with American people when they come over here for trade shows and for conferences, when they speak there. And a typical American audience is used to someone on stage who is kind of firing them up and yeah, and we are the best. And there is a very energetic energy, and energetic energy was nonsense, but you know what I mean. There's a lot of going on stage, and the audience in the States is responding adequately, getting up, cheers, yeah, bravo. You hardly ever experience that in Europe. So of course you get applause. Yeah. But this amount of applause and cheering all over Europe, we wouldn't take that seriously. We think like, no, they're kidding us. And the expectation from someone from the States coming over here is, of course, different, because very often the American speakers think, oh my God, they didn't like it. Oh, no, it's not the case. But we show appreciation differently. A little bit more drawn back, more serious, less enthusiastic, but more sustainable. Like a very typical US thing. You meet an American couple somewhere on vacation. Let's take a nice place. Let's take South Africa, right? So a European couple meets an American couple from the US in South Africa. We have dinner and you talk and you chat, and then very often American couple says, oh, you have to come visit. My recommendation to all my European friends, never ever believe that. Do not show up at their doorstep and say, oh, you said 6 months ago we should visit. No. This is the typical enthusiasm from Americans who just said, hey, we like being with you, right? It's very much okay with you. But the rest is a promise. In Europe, you probably hardly or way later would hear, come visit. But only when we really grow a friendship.
Wow. So I'm in big trouble because you said so much, but even just jump to the end of what you shared. My wife and I did the Camino de Santiago. Are you familiar with that? That's Spain. And so we met people from all over the world, and we really enjoyed time with this Italian couple. And so, yeah, I'm the first one. Hey, you guys got to come out. But
you did?
I did. But we went and visited them. They invited us over.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. And let me take something intercultural. What brought the four of you together? You know, the two couples meeting in South Africa, they probably met coincidentally somewhere. The four of you had a common purpose. Pilgrimage. And that already gave you a huge dance floor for communication. There were purposes to talk about. There were goals to talk about, worries to talk about, hurdles to talk about, blisters, I think, at the end of the day, shared experiences that already during that short time frame, they might have been on the Santiago de Compostela on the pilgrimage, and you. So that already brought you together, which gives you both parties a different head start. And that's a recommendation from my side, and especially if it comes down to business communication. Try to find, yes, the common ground, the pilgrimage. but then quickly go to the edges, because this is where the action happens.
Yeah, I love what you're. Yeah, so let's just jump there. I'm writing down and I'm taking notes the whole time you're talking. So
Good.
get on my phone.
I'm sorry, I'm having a little cough.
That's all right. We started this podcast just to try and help one person. That one person is always Mike and I, and so
Yeah.
I'm taking notes, but I wrote down purpose, connection, and then shared experiences. And I think we do speak a similar language, so to say, you and Mike and I and C4 leaders, because we're trying to help create purpose, build connection, and do that through these shared experiences of what we create. And to me, this is going to sound a little naive, but I have a sense of urgency at this point in my life to create that. I don't want to waste time nickel and diamond, so to say, if you know what I mean by that, but just all the fluff stuff. I want to get in and help us all figure out what our purpose is, figure out how we're intertwined regardless of our polarization for the politics and the diversity. I mean, just figure out how we connect as humans through this shared experience. And then I know you have that through business, and I'm not guessing it's any different, even though it might, on paper perhaps look a little different, but at the end of the day, I have to believe that's kind of what we're all doing here.
Yeah, we do. And to me, there was, in communication, we work a lot with principles that easily can be applied. One of them, a principle that I would recommend for someone who says, you know what, I do not want to waste any more time of my life, or I don't want to waste any of your time. I mean, it goes both ways. One of the principles I personally think is working for that particular aspect especially well is what Kim Scott calls radical candor. That you kind of, if I'm saying naked, I don't mean that totally sexually. I mean that you were open to what you want to achieve, which radical candor does not necessarily mean that you have to be blunt or impolite or any of that, right? But you very clearly and in a very with a very strong empathy make your point. Sometimes there's a tendency that this way of communicating is a little bit less diplomatic, but I think this is a risk worth to be taken.
So I love that. I'm writing again, honest, genuine, and then making your point. But how, I think in order to do that, to have the radical candor that Kim Scott's talking about, and I love that's principle. I'm going to research her a little bit, but how
she wrote a book about that. It's a beautiful one.
Okay. How do you help your clients enter into that space? Because it takes courage. It takes vulnerability. It takes a lot of self-awareness. It takes a lot of deep thought into thinking, how do you want to be articulate? What is a message you want to get across?
Yeah.
Go ahead and stand up and say, hey, here's who I am and here's what I believe in. How do you help your clients do that? Because I think that's like the $1 million question.
$1 million, I would doubt, but the one of the ideas behind is all of them, all of the, I've never met one of my clients who didn't have an idea, a purpose, a message. This already is a very good beginning to make sure that the person realizes, I do have that. And then what we very often do first is that we check what are the belief systems that either push a person or keep a person from saying or doing whatever they mean. That is the next step. And then after that, we find the right words for that. Because not in all circumstances you can use every sentence. And then there's other systems easily to be applied. That there is an easy one, I call that the 4C. First of all, you give a little context. It means like a little reason why exactly I'm telling you the story. I'm telling you today why I am the person who is telling the story. What is the part of the story that is most important? So sometimes this is external context, like there is a political agenda, there was something happening. That could be everything that kind of is known as well to your audience as to you. And the second one is that you, of course, bring down your message to the real content. What is it you want to talk about? This is interestingly something very often my clients stumble upon, although it is supposed to be the most easy thing, the what. Then we work on that. That's very often a simplifying exercise. The third one is construct, the how. Now, this is the moment for the wording, for the beauty, for the simplicity of the words. And the fourth one is the most underestimated one, because you were talking about how do we change? How do we imply change with communication? And that is number 4, which is consequence. Every communication needs to have and to show what are the consequences of my words. How do I, when I say that, how do I make sure that the person who is receiving the communication is able intentionally to act upon it? Now, and that is already quite a long process that can be applied in a peer-to-peer conversation, or a feedback conversation, or in any keynote and any crisis communication. It works as well. So it's a pretty universal system that enables us to, first of all, get deeper and then fly higher and get broader. Let me put it like that.
I love it. And obviously, looking at Mike's shirt, that is a C that's on his shirt, and then the 4, and you call it 4C, and yeah. we are C4 leaders. Yeah. C4, as you know, is an explosive, is powerful. Yeah. So yeah, we're speaking the same language, different C's, but I love the context, content, construct, and consequence. Yeah, great tip. Let's go a step back here before we get into just you sharing your expertise and helping our listeners that way. And you can take this question any which way you like, but what was life like growing up? And you can go back to anytime. I always like the listeners just to kind of get an understanding of who you were kind of growing up.
I'm the only child of 2 very smart people. And that kind of guided me. Looking back how my parents raised me, I have nothing to add. If my children would have been educated the same way. Absolutely. So the way my parents taught me the mix of being in nature and being in books, in moving and stillness, although actually, to be honest, the moving part was easier for me than the stillness part, but that is a personal thing. I was very blessed. I never there's many stories of people say, oh, my parents never supported me, or my mother just wanted to fulfill her own dreams through me. I never had that. I was very, 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 very blessed and lucky with my parents, and it was very much a smooth sailing, really. The trouble, if there wasn't really trouble, but due to the fact that I always, it was always easy for me to speak up, to speak my mind. When I started working after university, I did the same thing. In university, that was encouraged as well. Okay, yeah, you have to, and you write an essay and you defend your thesis and all that. And then I started my first job, and in the very first meeting, the boss of the agency I was working for Saatchi at the time, he was conducting the meeting. And of course, I was speaking my mind. And after, I don't know, half an hour or something, he looked at me and said, "What you think is of no interest to nobody in that room." Of course, I was totally taken aback. It was the very first time in my life I was kind of rejected. That was a very valid lesson for me, because probably he was right at the time. And then after that, I learned that it is not every time is the right time to speak up. That there's better moments and worse moments to do that. To me, that was a very painful but very interesting lessons, especially because I was not, I was not familiar with that aspect during my childhood. Not at all.
I love it. I was reading a good book, and I think it was in this book, The Promise That Changes Everything, but the quote was like, "Shine by not shining." And I love that, of just learning your space of, let me just be quiet and take in and listen.
Yeah.
And doing so kind of allows yourself to shine, and just to be part of something. Let's get into you now. So your day is, 6:30 over where you are in Germany. What the show is called Life's Essential Ingredients, and I think the listeners are always trying to figure out, hey, what ingredient can I perhaps add to my life recipe? And so the question I have for you is, what are your life's essential ingredients? How do you do what you do on the daily? You're coaching yourself up. I mean, you're coaching all these other people, on communication. How do you coach yourself up, and what are some of your routines that you have that allow you to be the best version of your current self?
There is two things. Let me start with one. I have to myself a very honest scaling. A scaling that only I know. But a scaling that is, to me, goes from, let's say, 1 to 100. And I can scale every day, even every hour, and say, like, that day, that was 100. And then there is days where I say, like, oh my God, that was a 50. And sometimes it's a 10. And learning how much that is okay, and weighing the days or the actions I took that way, is helping me not to punish myself, but not to get ahead of myself either, all that. And that is number one. To me, that is very helpful to say in the evening or the next morning. Sometimes you really need a good night's sleep after a hard day, and then on the next morning to say, but yesterday was a pretty good 70 or 2, whatever the result was. The second one I regularly do is being very curious. My way of approaching the world is first and foremost the outside world. And that is why it helps me to ask curious questions to the most diverse people I don't know, people who know way more than I do, to experts in their field. Asking questions to me is something that helped improving my life a lot, because first of all, it tells you, okay, there is so many things you don't know which I knew already, but it gives you so much more insights in that mentally. And the second one, why I like asking curious questions, you meet the most crazy people. And that's cool. I like meeting people who have a totally different life experience, right? Just the edges. I'm interested in the edges. Why is it different in your place? And how is it different? And how does this difference look?
I love it. And just keeps you learning, each and every day.
Mm-hmm.
Things you mentioned early on in the episode was intercultural communication.
Yeah.
What walk us through what that is, and yeah.
To me, it's one of the major aspects of communication we are facing right now. All of us, we belong to different clusters. There is, and that is the small. Let me start with the smallest and least important one. That is the national cluster, or you consider yourself, you have the U.S. American nationality, or the French one, or the South African one, whatever. Then within that, you grew up in a certain demographic cluster. For instance, you grew up in the countryside, or you grew up in a city, or you're an urban person. And already there, it might be that you're from Detroit and I'm from Vienna, but already that brings us together because we come from urban backgrounds and we know how urbanity works. And someone who's coming from a rural area might have an easier time connecting to someone from another rural area, even if it's from another culture, right? So that's the next one. Then there is, of course, regionality. And that goes from coastal people understand each other more easily very often because they know the sea and the wind than mountain people. Oh yeah, the weather changes very quickly. And there is a third dimension that is very hard to understand from people who come from flat countries. So then, of course, there is the generation, which is right now one of the most interesting gaps we do have. It looks like that the boomers don't talk to the Gen X anymore, and then the Gen Z and the I generation don't talk to each other either. So these are generational clusters we belong to. I'm a Generation X, right? So that is something that brings you together. On Facebook or on any other social media, you very often see these nice posts that, if you remember that, and then you see a picture of a CD or of a cassette, then you're generation whatever. So that's another one. That's another cultural cluster where we as communication trainers bring people together. That goes on when you're working for a company and you're in procurement. You might be from a totally different cultural cluster than you're from marketing and communications, because you have different attitudes towards the way your work needs to be done. Your work is shaped, the expectation. And all these different classes, I could go on. It's men, it's women, it's different sexes. All these clusters, they shape our conversations. And my job is to be the translator and to make it easier for all these different clusters to understand each other in a way that there are less misunderstandings. There's a beautiful saying, they say it comes from Queen Margaret from Denmark. I don't know if that's true, it doesn't matter. And it says all the wars that happen because of the conversations that didn't. So, and if you learn to interact and intercommunicate between these clusters, now I think that's the most beautiful thing we can achieve within organizations, within families, within political systems, within countries.
Yeah, I've got a question. What is, for someone trying to cross over these clusters, what's a good way? Is there a good technique to get the conversation started with someone?
I'm a little above the edges here, because what I'm going to say now is probably a little bit against the mainstream. Due to my curiosity, I recommend don't start with the commonalities, but start with what is different. But do that in a very appreciated way, in a way of like, wow, this is cool. I have never seen someone doing this. How do you do that? This, right? More in the sense of, this is wonderful what you do there. This is new to me. Not in the sense of, why are you doing that? No. More in the sense of, wow, fascinating. So out of that fascination for the difference. So I would start there. Usually people in communication say, yeah, you have to find the commonalities. I think that the differences are way more interesting to talk about first, but again, in this fascinating manner. And then you'll find the commonalities pretty quickly yourself.
I love that. Man, I really like that. I'm writing down some other notes. I'll keep my thoughts to myself, but a really good idea. Maybe after the show is over, I'm going to pick your brain on it. But let's get into, say you're called into a client where they're not doing all the stuff that you just talked about, and they're having a lot of problems around their communication and a lot of misunderstandings. What is one of the first steps that you try and help people work through these misunderstandings?
Before you can identify anything, you have to build or create what we call a communication baseline, a kind of state of communication between and within all the different parties at hand. And a very beautiful exercise to do that, a very fun one, is that you let all the different clusters, there could be individuals, there could be a team, there could be a department, let them draw a map, their map. Literally, let them draw a map or let them build a countryside. So, for instance, there is the desert of bureaucracy in our company, or there is the peak of influence. I don't know. So let them creatively build and create their own map. Because a map is not the country. It is just a perspective. So and then you let everybody else or the other parties in the group do the same thing. And then you let them explain their map to the others. Now that already leads to so many ahas that they say, oh, this is what you mean. I always thought you meant, and you never, no, this is more this. And all of a sudden, the first misunderstandings, they kind of blow out of the window very easily. And it's a very fun exercise, really. So, and you achieve by that two things. First of all, you build a communication baseline and you find out what their real trouble is. And the second thing is they learn that a perspective on something is not the truth. There is just a perspective. And then when they hear a different perspective, all of a sudden there's already two perspectives. Wow. And then you build from there. And from there it goes a little bit, it can go a million ways, depending on the team, on the size, on the trouble, on the urgency, all these particular aspects. But that to me is a wonderful and a very colorful way to start such an interaction, to be honest.
I love it. I love it. And you're just basically giving everybody a voice, and in giving everybody a voice, allowing people to then see their point of view, their perspective. Love that. Let's talk a little bit more about some potential challenges that come up with feedback. And so, say you're called in to work with some managers of a company, and they have to give, they're evaluating their staff's performance, and they have to give some feedback. what insight would you give to a listener who potentially is in that position of like, man, I can't stand every time I have to do an employee evaluation because it's just awkward and it's tough. And how do you help your clients navigate those waters, so to say?
Change the system. Because exactly what you say, oh my God, why do I have to stick to that framework? Why do I have to use these stupid questions for that feedback? Good feedback, good in the sense of impactful feedback, feedback where everybody can relate to, first of all, happens constantly. It is kind of interwoven in the daily work. Feedback that only happens every 6 months is useless, is absolutely useless, especially in times like these, when when we develop very diverse forms of working together, from virtually to remote first to offices. So we have, it's impossible to only have every 6 months a feedback talk with the manager, and the manager doesn't like it, because then all of a sudden 2 days or 3 days are blocked only for these feedback talks. And then very often the manager doesn't know anymore. Oh my God, was it Mike who did that activity? Did he do well? Then they have to research again. It's a nightmare. So first of all, change the system. Make it, turn it into a process that is a constant, fluid part of your daily work. It doesn't mean necessarily that you have to give daily feedback. That's not my point. But feedback should be something very natural. And in a 6-month feedback, for everybody, feels, in exactly what you said, just awkward. No. And then you have 10 questions. You have to answer. Ooh, no. That is very, very, very 1995. Really. Just change the system. Find something with your team where you say, like, look, what would match the way we work? We as a team now in 2023. And then let the team help you as a team lead or a manager to create a feedback frame that is implemented in that. So that is number one. And then the second thing, because there was many people say, yeah, you have to say a good thing or 5 good things, and then you can add 1 bad thing. And it's like, I'm not counting. It's way more important that the person who's receiving the feedback is absolutely certain that you separate the content from the person. So if I have to tell you that you screwed up that marketing activity, and actually there were $500,000 wasted, you'll probably get fired then, but it doesn't matter. You have to make sure that I'm still telling you, look, you are an exceptional person, and I know that you do a lot of things well. And this activity didn't do well for our company. So that you separate these two, separate the person from the activity. It requires in the team a basis level of trust. And this is something next to changing the system of feedback, I absolutely would invest as a manager. Make sure that every single activity you start with your team as a manager is happening within that trust field. If they don't trust you, you'll never get honest feedback, and they won't ever believe you if you give them feedback, positive or negative. They won't believe the positive, they won't believe the negative.
I love what you're saying. So I got to jump in then and ask, because I think that's one of the hardest things to achieve is trust. How do you help your teams, your clients build trust? And I'll throw in transparency throughout what they're doing. If you're called in and, man, we just don't trust each other, this company has called you in and we need some help. What are some of your processes that you do to help your clients in that space?
That requires a lot of briefing talks before, because the reasons why they do not trust each other or do not trust each other anymore, that is something that, there was a moment when they trusted, and then that changed. So you need to go back to that particular moment. And here again, you need to hear every voice before you can kind of wipe the sheet clean and start from scratch. And then every voice needs to count. You really have to go the long way, even if it takes 3 weeks, that every member of the team, every voice is heard, in the sense of, for me, it would be trust if the manager is doing this or saying that. One of the things that happens most frequently, that's why I'm pointing it out here, is that information is seen as means of power. Now, that got way harder in the internet age. Thank God for this. But still, the idea of divide and conquer by, I'm not telling you this, and I only invite him to the meeting. So it is very childish, but it happens still very often. Now, this is the first thing, and this covers a big part of distrust, that you are, as a manager in a leadership position, that you are transparent, that you share with everybody what needs to be shared, but that everybody takes responsibility to get the information they need to get. So that there is, that there shouldn't be any hidden corners, that maybe Mike did only invite Jeff to that meeting, and I don't know why. And then all of a sudden a suspicion is raised. Now, and that is already, first of all, cost a lot of energy, because people then have the tendency only to cover their ass instead of doing their work. So nothing goes forward then. You're just investigating. Have you been invited to the meeting? Okay, why you? Why not me? Oh my God, endless discussion. So this kind of transparency is already solving a lot of these trust issues. Not all of them. Don't get me wrong here, but it's a very good start to have a look there. Do I share in an appropriate manner with my team what they need to know? And maybe a little bit more.
I love it. I love it. This is going to be a little bit of a naive question, but we got to bring it up, because you're a communication expert traveling the world. But how important is listening? And how do you help your clients kind of increase that skill?
I mean, as well as I know, and the question is not naive, listening is the hot topic, at least for the last 5 years. And sometimes it looks to me as if in the decades before, no one was listening, which is not true. But the quality of listening and the results we could achieve by listening are so strong that everybody now is diving into that quality. And I'm absolutely for it. Because this is one of the best things energetically you can do, because it requires, in comparison to anything else, listening requires little. Listening requires a lot, but in comparison to all the rest, it does require little. It does require an open posture, a genuine interest, a paraverbal understanding, and a rephrasing of what has been said. And of course, the ability to shut up and really let the other person finish the thought. And if you do that, again, And even say, if you're not genuinely interested, I think it's fair enough to say to the person, tomorrow would be a better time to talk about that, because my mind is really busy with other things now, and I couldn't really listen to you. So listen with intent, and not listen to wait until the sentence is over and then you can respond. This is such a cool exercise. And again, it's easier than you think. We just do not do it often enough, honestly. So it's a good thing every day to have a couple of conversations where you mainly listen. These are the best ones. So you need to start somewhere.
Great tips. Great tips. Any books that you would recommend? I know you mentioned Kim Scott. Any other books that you could recommend for the listener?
There is millions. There is millions. I mean, let me take a couple of classics. Robert Cialdini, Influence is good. That is one of the classic books. I'm highly recommending Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. That is a very good one. Then in communication, there is a good one. Why No One Understands You and What You Can Do About That. That's a good one. Actually, it is easier to find a book than to practice, but practice is more important. Read whatever book you find attractive about that topic, or a book that has been recommended to you. But even more importantly, practice. No book, no, really, especially not in communication, no book can exchange the experience. You need to fail, you need to do it again, you need to do it again, and then you need to feel the success. This is nothing can beat this feeling. And no book, you can have read 1,000 books and still be a lousy communicator, and that would be a shame. So rather have 1,000 conversations and practice 2 or 3 principles.
Love it. Love it. Well, that's what you've done for your life. And I'm going to jump to the end here. You've been helping people all over the world do what you just said. And unfortunately, it's time for you to go home, to go upstairs. You're on your deathbed and you're getting ready to take your last breath. And we're 50 years, fast forward here, and you are surrounded by people that love you and that you've loved. And there's a great quote from John Alston that says, the only thing you take with you when you're gone is what you leave behind. What is it, Katja, that you want to leave behind when your time comes?
That I lightened up the days of many people with the stories I told them and supported them to discover their own stories.
I love it. I love
That's a tough one. It's really a tough one.
Yeah. Pasho, get us home, baby.
Wow, Katja, that's a great way to end it. That was beautiful. I saw you thinking it through. That was really good one. And thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate it. And what a pleasure this was. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, listeners, again, we've been season 3, episode 30. Katja Schleicher. She's in Germany, but she lives in the Netherlands. Her website, KatjaSchleicher.com. Check her out. She's the communication guru, helping people all over the world. And you know how we do it. Boom, baby. That just happened. We out.